My name wasn't on the invitation, but my mother made sure Emily's name was printed in gold. Dr. Emily Whitmore, PhD keynote speaker. I stood by the door holding the gift I'd brought, homemade balm from the refugee clinic in Syria. She looked at it like I'd handed her a rock. "Oh," she said flatly, "we already have centerpieces." She placed it behind a vase of imported orchids. I watched her do it, slowly, deliberately. In that moment, I realized even the flowers got more space at her table than I did. The house smelled like cinnamon and expensive candles. The kind my sister gifts every holiday, wrapped in tissue paper she initials with wax. I wandered to the living room. Photos everywhere, graduations, weddings, even Emily's TEDx talk. No trace of me. Not even the framed picture we once took in Port-au-Prince after my first assignment. It used to sit on the mantel. It was gone. "Karen," my aunt called from the kitchen. "You're still doing that, volunteer thing overseas." "Volunteer. I'm leading emergency response teams in war zones," I said quietly. "Oh," she replied, adjusting her pearls. "Well, Emily's heading the new research center at WashU. Isn't that amazing?" My sister walked in right on cue. Hair perfect. Dress pressed. Her kids trailing behind her like a magazine ad. "Glad you made it," she said, not looking at me. "Try not to disappear this time, okay?" Disappear? I had missed her last 2 birthdays. Because I was performing CPR on a boy who'd stepped on a landmine. But sure, let's talk about disappearing. I stepped outside to breathe. The winter air cut through my lungs sharper than I expected. I stared at the driveway, at the luxury cars, at the Christmas lights blinking in sync. Behind me, laughter. Champagne being poured. My mother's voice saying she could have had a real career if she just stayed. She still believed I left out of shame. She never understood I left out of purpose. And that night in the freezing dark, I made myself a quiet promise. Next time they speak my name, it won't be with pity. It'll be because the whole world heard it first. Would you keep chasing their approval or rewrite your worth without them? Where are you listening from tonight? Has anyone ever erased your story while smiling to your face? I live in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store in South City, St. Louis. The walls are thin, the carpet is worn. And every morning at 5:52, the man downstairs opens the metal gate with a rattle that shakes the floor. But the light through my kitchen window is soft. The smell of my coffee maker, the drip of routine. I find comfort in small consistencies. My refrigerator hums beside a corkboard pinned with photos from the field. Not family portraits, but real faces. A newborn I helped resuscitate in Haiti. A nurse in Aleppo who gave me her only blanket during a sandstorm. They know my name. Even if my family doesn't say it. 6 years ago, after my divorce finalized, I sat at this very table and opened an email from Global Crisis Medical Initiative. Deployment urgent. Beirut. Field medic. 3 months. Housing provided. No fanfare, no big decision, just a yes. I had nothing left to lose. My ex-husband Eric took the house. The car. Joint custody of our 2 kids meant weekends and holidays became negotiations. I lost the rhythm of motherhood in courtrooms and supervised pickups. My mother blamed me. "If you had just stayed quieter, none of this would have happened." My sister Emily didn't say much. She just sent me a list of therapists. I packed 2 duffels and flew out on a rainy Thursday. The first night in Beirut, I cried in a bunk bed surrounded by strangers. One was a dentist from Atlanta, another a midwife from Bolivia, and me barely holding myself together, clutching a worn photo of my children. But the next morning I was inserting IVs in the dark, scrubbing blood off walls, helping a Syrian grandmother learn how to change her grandson's bandages. I stopped crying. The months became years. The stamps on my passport multiplied, and the silence from my family stayed the same. They never asked about the work. Only when I'd settled down, returned to something normal. One year I sent a postcard from Nairobi. Wrote, "We delivered twins by candlelight last night." My mother replied 2 months later, Emily's daughter just won her first violin competition. We're so proud. No mention of mine. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I kept waiting for anyone to ask what it was like out there. To ask how I was doing, but the only people who asked wore Kevlar vests and carried trauma kits. My kids are older now. Ben is 18 and Lucy just turned 15. They live with Eric in the suburbs. He remarried. His new wife Danielle teaches yoga and posts family brunch photos like I never existed. Lucy once said Danielle makes really good pancakes. It shattered me in a way I never admitted to anyone. Ben texts sometimes. Mostly memes or "you good mom," but I take what I can get. Last Christmas I sent them a care box snacks from my last mission in Jordan, a handwoven scarf and a necklace I bought from a refugee vendor. Only Lucy responded. FT. It's cute. I came back to the US for a short break in 2023. I had 3 weeks off between missions. I asked my mother if I could stay with her. She said the guest room was already spoken for Emily's kids were coming. So I stayed at a Red Roof Inn on Lindbergh Belvedere. The vending machine was out of order. The bed squeaked every time I moved. But it was quiet. And alone. One evening, I passed by a family dinner on the patio of a restaurant in Clayton. Laughter, birthday candles, matching sweaters. It took me 5 full seconds to realize they were mine. My mother, sister, nieces, my kids. All there. No one had told me. I ducked behind a parked SUV, heart pounding. Ben looked taller. Lucy had braces now. They were singing for Emily's daughter. I waited for someone to glance around, to say, "Where's Karen?" but they never did. I walked the rest of the way back to the motel in the dark. Some nights I wondered if I had become the cautionary tale. The sister who left. The daughter who ran. The mother who chose war zones over carpool. But they never saw what I saw. They never held a child whose village had burned the night before. Never bandaged a wound so deep you could see bone. Never whispered, "Stay with me," while sirens wailed. They called me reckless. I called it necessary. I saved my first life in Mosul. The boy's name was Khalid. He was 9. His femoral artery was ruptured. I had exactly 6 minutes to stop the bleeding. I did. Later he handed me a single yellow marble. "I found it in the rubble," he said. "You're the only one who talks to me like I'm still here." I carry that marble in my coat pocket. Still do. So no, I don't live in a big house. I don't have a plaque or a lawn. But I have names etched into memory. I have midnight surgeries under tarp roofs. I have stories that never made the family newsletter. And somewhere in a locked cabinet at the NGO's headquarters, my name is on a report titled "Personnel Most Reliable Under Pressure." Not that they'll ever read it. 3 days after I returned to South Sudan, I treated a little girl named Amina. She was 7. Burns covered over half her body. She never cried once. I sat beside her cot that night, stroking her soot-matted hair with gloved fingers, whispering lullabies I hadn't sung since Lucy was a toddler. When Amina finally closed her eyes, I slipped outside, leaned against the clinic's tin siding, and checked my phone. 1 missed call from my ex-husband. And a photo in the family group chat titled, "The Girls at Brunch, Emily, my mother, my daughter." Sitting at a white tablecloth cafe, plates of avocado toast in front of them. Lucy wore a baby blue cardigan. Her hand rested gently on Emily's wrist. I zoomed in. She was wearing the necklace I'd sent her from Jordan. But she hadn't tagged me. She hadn't even told them where it came from. The caption read, "Thanks, Aunt Emily, for the thoughtful gift." My fingers trembled as I closed the app. A mosquito buzzed near my ear. I slapped at it, missing. The sting I felt wasn't from an insect. It was from erasure. 2 days later, a package arrived at the field base. No note. Just a shoebox of laminated photos from the recent family cruise. All printed. All smiling. Emily had included a handwritten caption on the back of one: "Ben's first snorkeling lesson. Mom was so proud." No mention of me. Not even a "wish you were here." At night I started dreaming about hospital corridors. Not the dusty tents I worked in now, but clean white floors, fluorescent lights. I would be walking down them searching every room, looking for someone. My name echoed on the intercom, but no one would answer. I'd wake up drenched in sweat. On a humid Thursday, we received an emergency call. Landslide. Northern District. A medical tent had collapsed with 2 nurses trapped inside. I boarded the truck with my gear packed tight. An hour later, I was crawling through canvas and debris shouting names. I found Laura, her leg pinned under a generator. She was conscious, bleeding, terrified. "I don't want to die in here," she said. "You won't," I whispered, gripping her hand. "I'm not letting go." It took us 47 minutes to dig her out. Her pulse never dropped. Later that night, she said, "You're the reason I'm still breathing." I smiled politely, then went back to my cot and cried harder than I had in months. The next morning, I received a voicemail. Emily's voice smooth and clipped. "Hey Karen, I just wanted to let you know that Mom's hosting a brunch next weekend. Ben and Lucy are coming. I know you're somewhere, but just thought I'd extend the invite anyway." Somewhere. I was in a village with no running water, still smelling of iodine and diesel, washing blood out of my scrubs by hand. Somewhere. I didn't reply, but I did something I hadn't done in years. I Googled my name. What came up wasn't flattering: an old hospital listing from 2014, an expired LinkedIn page, a local news piece about Emily's keynote at a university panel. The article mentioned she came from a distinguished family of women in healthcare. No quote from me. No mention I had spent 6 years delivering babies on mats, stitching bullet wounds, and resuscitating lives in places most people couldn't pronounce. I closed the browser and sat still. Outside, the village children were kicking a deflated soccer ball, laughing. Inside, my chest felt like a cracked window, still holding but barely. I pulled my duffel from under the cot. At the bottom was the yellow marble Khalid had given me in Mosul. I turned it in my fingers until the light caught the swirl inside. Sometimes small things hold the whole weight of memory. 2 weeks later, a team from the UN arrived. They brought with them new equipment and a satellite connection. We could send full emails again. Photos. Video calls. I hesitated. Then I called Ben. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, casual. "You okay?" "I'm good," I replied. I saw the brunch photos. You and Lucy looked grown up." He smiled a little. "Yeah, it was okay. Kinda fake." "Fake," he shrugged. "You know how Grandma gets. Emily too, everything's for show." I hesitated. "Do you miss me, Ben?" A long pause. "Yeah, I do, just don't always know how to say it." I breathed in through my nose. Held it. "That's enough," I whispered. That night I video called Lucy. She didn't answer. But 10 minutes later I got a text. "Hey. Sorry. With friends. Love you though." It wasn't much. But it was more than silence. A week later, our field clinic was raided by local militia. They stole medicine, smashed supplies, held our team at gunpoint for 20 minutes. I stayed calm, hands raised, speaking in the only words I remembered from their dialect: "We help your people. No weapons. Only medicine." They left. But the damage remained. We spent 3 days rebuilding. No press. No medals. No headlines. Just bandages, sweat, and silence. That Sunday, while restocking gauze, I got another photo. From Emily, Lucy's first solo violin recital. Her smile beamed through my cracked phone screen. Caption: "She was flawless. We're so proud." No invitation. No live stream link. No. "We wish you were here." Just a reminder that I wasn't. That night I scrolled through every photo I'd taken in the last 6 years. Disaster zones. Collapsed bridges. A mother weeping into my arms as her baby coughed one final time. Then I opened my journal. Wrote a single line. "They only see the table I'm not sitting at, never the lives I'm kneeling beside." The last time I saw my mother, she kissed both my sister's children on the forehead. Then turned to me and said, "You look tired, Karen. Are you getting enough protein over there? Not how are you? Not I'm glad you're home, just a nutrition tip." I nodded. "I'm fine, Mom. Thanks." She turned back to Emily and asked about her latest grant. I had flown home early, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. A cholera outbreak we expected didn't escalate, so they gave us a short leave window. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Part of me hoped they'd be surprised, happy, maybe even proud. But when I walked into my mother's kitchen, she looked like she'd seen an inconvenience, not her daughter. "Oh, you should have called. I just cleaned." The house smelled like lemon pledge and new rugs. Not cinnamon like it used to. Not lived in. There were new photos on the hallway wall. One with Emily standing beside my daughter Lucy at a science fair, another of my mother and Ben in front of his college dorm. I wasn't in any of them. That night, Emily came over with her kids. We sat around the same table I grew up eating grilled cheese on, now covered in neutral linens and artisan napkin rings. Emily sipped white wine and told the story of how Lucy had won second place in the state essay contest. She wrote about resilience, she said proudly. I looked over at my daughter. Her cheeks flushed. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She said she wrote it about her mentor. Emily added, her voice soft. My stomach turned. "Who?" I asked. Lucy fidgeted. Aunt Emily." The room fell quiet. Even the wine stopped breathing. I looked down at my plate. Salmon. Quinoa. Some microgreen I couldn't name. I barely tasted it. "That's great," I managed. "Really great, Lou." My mother refilled Emily's glass. No one asked what I'd been doing. No one noticed the faded scar along my wrist from a field accident 6 months ago, or the brace I wore on my left ankle after carrying a collapsed woman 3 miles in Darfur. I was just there, occupying a chair, filling a space, unseen. After dinner, Emily walked me to my car. "I didn't mean for it to come out that way," she said. I closed the trunk. "It's fine," I said. She looks up to me. "Karen, I'm here. I'm reliable." I nodded, because I knew what came next. "You're brave." "You are, but you're also gone." Gone. Like I'd vanished. Like 6 years of risk and sacrifice made me less present, not more human. I turned to her. "You think I left because I didn't care?" She hesitated. "I think you left because it was easier than staying." I wanted to scream. Instead I said, "It's never been easy." She crossed her arms. "Maybe not, but it wasn't our choice." And that was the thing. They never chose this version of me. They only mourned the one I left behind. 2 days later, I stopped by Ben's college. I'd texted him the day before, no reply. I showed up anyway. He was walking out of the library with friends. I waved. He froze. "Hey Mom," he said quickly. "Didn't know you were coming." One of his friends asked this, "Your aunt?" Ben's face flushed. I waited. "No, my mom," he corrected. I smiled gently, but something cracked inside me. We got coffee. It was awkward. He checked his phone 5 times in 20 minutes. When I asked about his classes, he gave short answers. When I asked about Lucy, he shrugged. "I don't really see her much," he said. "Emily picks her up now." My stomach sank. I nodded. "You know," I said quietly, "when you were 4, I carried you for 6 blocks in a blackout to get to a hospital. You had a fever of 104. He looked surprised. "I don't remember that." "I do." Back at my apartment, I stared at my closet. Inside were 2 uniforms, my old ER scrubs and my field medic vest with my blood type stitched above the heart. Neither fit who I was anymore. But I didn't know what did. I pulled out an envelope from my top drawer. Inside, a letter from the UN, commending me for my role in stabilizing medical infrastructure in a level 4 conflict zone. No one in my family had ever seen it. That night, I posted a photo. It was simple, just my hand holding a field report, dirt under my nails, the caption: "We saved 13 people today." No hashtags, no applause, just breath. I didn't tag anyone. Didn't wait for likes. But hours later, I saw Emily had liked it. No comment. Just a heart. I wasn't sure what it meant. Maybe nothing. Maybe something. But it felt unfinished. A week later, I got a voicemail from my mother. She never leaves voicemails. Karen, it's me. There's a dinner next Friday. Emily's receiving a community award. The mayor's attending. I thought, well, you might want to be there. Or not. Up to you. Click. Not I want you there. Just you might. I replayed it 3 times. Then I deleted it. Because that's when I knew I didn't need to be invited to belong. But I did need to stop begging to matter. The email came while I was packing for deployment. Subject: RE Final Family Archive. Approval needed from Emily Whitmore. I hesitated before opening it. Inside, a draft of our family's commemorative book. A legacy project Mom had talked about for years. Photos, family trees, scanned letters, interviews. I typed Karen into the search bar. 4 results. 2 were photos I had submitted myself. 1 was a group photo at my high school graduation. The last was a short caption. Karen, our adventurous one, worked in nursing and now volunteers abroad. Volunteers. No mention of deployments. Of mass casualty triage. Of evacuating injured civilians under fire. Just volunteers abroad. I stared at it for a long time. Then closed the laptop without replying. That night I sat on my porch with a mug of black coffee. It was too hot. The kind that scorches the roof of your mouth before you remember to blow. But I didn't flinch. Because lately everything burned. I tried calling Lucy. No answer. Ben responded with a thumbs up emoji after I texted him. Love you. Be safe. I watched the 3 dots appear. Then disappear. Nothing else came through. At 2:14 a.m. I found myself scrolling through old voicemails. There was one from my daughter aged 10. Hi, Mommy. I brushed my hair without fighting. Miss you. Love you. I pressed it 3 times. Each time the ache behind my ribs pressed harder. Deployment was scheduled for Tuesday. I had 2 days left in St. Louis. 2 days in a city where I no longer felt rooted. I walked past my old hospital, the ER, where I used to clock in at 6:45 a.m. Sharp shoes squeaking on disinfected floors. The new staff didn't know me. Security looked twice before waving me through the front lobby. I stood near the nurse's station, hands in my coat pockets. Watched as a younger nurse gently helped an elderly man with his oxygen mask. I remembered what it felt like to be needed in that way. To be familiar, to belong. But no one said my name anymore. I left without being noticed. Again. The night before I flew out, I drove by my mother's house. Lights were on. Cars in the driveway. A family dinner probably. Maybe celebrating Emily's award again. Maybe nothing at all. I didn't knock. Didn't get out, just watched from the car. Through the front window, I saw Lucy at the table. She was laughing. Her head tilted back the way mine used to. And for a second I imagined opening that door. Sitting beside her. Reaching for her hand. But I didn't. I couldn't tell if that was restraint or surrender. The flight to Nairobi was long. 14 hours in economy, middle seat, no eye contact. I didn't sleep. Instead, I replayed every moment that told me I was unwanted. Every phone call unanswered. Every family photo missing my face. Every holiday brunch I was never told about. By the time the plane landed, I felt hollow. But also, oddly clear. They had chosen their version of me. The easier one to accept. The one who volunteered abroad. The one who was gone. And maybe it was time I stopped chasing their rewrite. At the base camp, I fell into routine fast. Check vitals. Inventory meds. Train the local midwives. Hold hands when pain overtook language. My work didn't need applause. It just needed showing up. But 2 weeks in, a U.S. State Department vehicle arrived unexpectedly. They were looking for me. One of the agents handed me a sealed envelope. I opened it under a mango tree while flies buzzed lazily overhead. Inside a letter. Short. Formal. Your actions in the Northern Sudan field mission have been formally reviewed by the Department of Defense and White House Medical Liaison Office. Your name appears on the commendation list for civilians operating in conflict zones under duress. I blinked. Then read it again. I remembered that night. When the truck exploded. When I pulled a man with half his face gone across the rocks, screaming for help no one could hear. Now apparently someone had. 2 days later, I got the follow-up email. Pending formal approval, your presence is requested in Washington, D.C. for a civilian recognition ceremony. Dress formal. Further details classified. I stared at the screen. Then laughed. Not out of joy. Just disbelief. Because of course now they wanted me back. Now, when my name had finally made it to rooms where decisions happened, I didn't tell my family. Not yet. Because a deeper part of me wondered, would it even matter? If they didn't understand why. The morning after the email from Washington, I took my coffee out behind the clinic. The air was heavy with wood smoke and dust. Children were laughing nearby, chasing a plastic bottle tied to a string. I hadn't replied yet, hadn't told anyone. Not the team, not the director. Certainly not my family. The letter felt unreal. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because it had taken this long to be seen. That afternoon, I walked to the edge of the village where a boy had fractured his leg falling from a mango tree. His name was Daniel. He wore a threadbare t-shirt that said St. Louis Cardinals. I told him I used to live there. He smiled. Big city, big enough, I said. I showed him how to wrap his splint. He gripped my wrist and whispered, "Tell them I'm not weak." I blinked. Who? He looked down. Everyone. I sat with him for an hour. That night I opened my journal. I wrote one line. They may not write my name in their books, but it's carved into the skin of the living. Then I folded the invitation from DC and placed it between the pages. The next week I made a list. Not of what to pack, not of what to wear, but of what I would no longer wait for. Apologies that come too late. Questions never asked. Photos. I was never in tables. I was never invited to. Stories told about me, not to me. Then I drafted the reply. Formal. Clear. Yes, I would attend. Yes, I understood the details would remain partially classified. No, I did not require additional accommodation. No, I would not be bringing a guest. I hit send. Then turned off the Wi-Fi. 3 days later, a supply truck arrived with mail. Packages. A yellow envelope from my mother. Inside a brochure for Emily's newest lecture series, titled Modern Womanhood, Responsibility and Belonging. No note. Just a sticky tab marking her bio. Emily Whitmore, PhD, is inspired by the legacy of the women in her family, particularly her late grandmother and mother. I didn't exist, not even as inspiration. I folded the brochure in half, then in half again, then again until it could fit in my palm, then tossed it into the fire pit behind the clinic. It curled fast, paper blistering in heat. Some legacies aren't inherited, they're rewritten. The day before my flight, I received a voice message from Ben. Hey, Grandma said something about you going to Washington. Is that real? Pause. If it is, I hope they know who they're honoring. Another pause. You don't talk about what you do, but I've started reading. About the missions. What it takes. I get it more now. At least I'm trying to. Then quiet. You're braver than anyone in this family wants to admit. Click. On the plane home, I stared at my own reflection in the tiny bathroom mirror. Lines deeper than last year. Eyes more tired but steadier. I applied a small amount of concealer. Something to soften. Not to hide. My dress uniform stayed pressed in the garment bag above my seat. Name tag polished. Medals arranged. This time I didn't feel like I was pretending to be someone worth honoring. This time I believed it. Landing in DC, I took a cab to a modest hotel 2 blocks from the Capitol. No press outside. No entourage. Just me. I unpacked slowly, laying my items with care: uniform, shoes. A small pouch with my grandfather's medic pin inside. I'd never worn it. But tomorrow, I would. That evening I received the formal schedule. Ceremony at 2 p.m. White House East Room. Civilian recognition for acts of exceptional humanitarian response under combat conditions. No cameras during speeches. Limited press afterward. Guests permitted. But I had listed no guests. Because they weren't guests. They were observers. Spectators to a life they never asked about. At 11:43 p.m. my phone lit up. Text from Emily. Heard something about you being in D.C. tomorrow. True, I stared at the screen. Then typed yes. Seconds later, is it public? I paused. Then answered parts of it. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. At 6:10 a.m., I stood in front of the full-length mirror at the hotel, tied my hair back, pinned my insignia over my heart, slid my grandfather's pin into the lapel. I whispered, "Let them see who they tried to erase." Then I took a deep breath and walked out. The East Room was bright. Chandeliers overhead. Rows of chairs, some filled with strangers, some with decorated generals, and a few marked family. I spotted them immediately. My mother, Emily, Ben. Lucy wasn't there. They looked unsure. Out of place in their own capital. My mother clutched her purse like it held answers. Emily sat stiff, her hands folded tight. Ben gave me a small nod. I didn't return it. Not yet. My name was called. I stepped forward. As the aide read the citation words like exemplary, under fire, life-saving, I kept my eyes straight ahead. But I felt them. Behind me. Shifting. Listening. Learning what they never asked. The president approached. His voice warm, quiet, firm. You were there when others ran. You stayed. You saved. Not just lives, but hope itself. Then, after placing the medal around my neck, he leaned in and said, "You remind us who we should be." The room erupted in applause. My hands didn't shake. After the ceremony, I stood in the reception hall, sipping lukewarm coffee from a porcelain cup. Around me, generals, diplomats, and civilian honorees mingled. They spoke in measured tones, nods, handshakes. Congratulations. I kept my back straight, smile reserved. Eyes scanning but not searching. Until I saw them. My family. Standing near the dessert table like they weren't sure they belonged. My mother in her pressed beige coat, eyes darting from chandelier to floor. Emily beside her, arms crossed, lips tight. Ben looking at me like he was seeing someone new and wasn't sure how to speak to her. I walked toward them slowly. They noticed. My mother straightened her posture. Emily cleared her throat. Ben smiled first. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. I nodded. "Hi." Emily was the next to speak. "That was quite the speech," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the front. "That was the citation," I said calmly. "Not a speech. Just facts." Emily flinched just barely. My mother stepped forward. Her voice wavered, unusually soft. "I didn't know, Karen. None of us knew what you were really doing." I raised an eyebrow. "You never asked." She looked down. I let the silence stretch between us. I turned to Ben. "Thank you for coming." He hesitated. "Mom, I'm sorry for not getting it sooner." His voice cracked. And that oddly hurt more than any insult ever had, because it wasn't cruel. It was honest. I put my hand on his shoulder. "That means more than you know." Then I looked at Emily. "I don't need your pride," I said gently. "But I won't let you wear my story like a shawl. Not anymore." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Later, I slipped out to the hotel lobby, removed the medal, placed it in its velvet case, slid the box beneath layers of soft clothes in my suitcase. Not because I was ashamed, but because it wasn't the medal that mattered. It was what I'd already carried without it. Back home in St. Louis, the emails came quickly. Media outlets requesting interviews. Two nonprofits asking me to speak. A local paper wanting to feature the woman behind the honor. I said no to most. Then chose one. A podcast called Unheard Valor. Not flashy, but real. I sat in a quiet studio, mic warm against my mouth, and told my story, not just the war zones, but the family dinners. I wasn't invited to the names I was never called by. And I ended with this. Sometimes the hardest battlefield isn't a war zone. It's a living room filled with people who say they love you and never ask where you've been. The episode aired. And 2 days later, I received a letter, handwritten. Unfamiliar handwriting. It was from Lucy. I listened. I cried. I didn't know. I do now. Can we start over? I sat on the porch and cried like I hadn't since Mosul. Not from pain, but from relief. That weekend I made a plan. Not revenge. Not confrontation. But quiet reclamation. I printed out the family archive Emily had sent months ago, grabbed a red pen, and started annotating. Karen, our adventurous one, became Karen Whitmore, decorated field medic. 6 years of humanitarian service across 5 conflict zones. Photo caption: Emily with Lucy at her recital. Karen missed this recital while evacuating 6 children under mortar fire in Sudan. Page after page. I didn't send it back. I printed a second copy. Bound it. Slid it onto my own bookshelf between my grandfather's war letters and my first field journal. Because my history deserved space. Even if no one else left room for it. A month later, Emily called. I wanted to let you know we're hosting Thanksgiving at my place. Mom's coming. Ben and Lucy too. You're welcome, if you'd like. I paused. Why now? She sighed, because I finally listened. Really listened. And I realized, you're not the one who disappeared. We just stopped looking. Another pause. I won't pretend to understand everything. But I'd like to try. I breathed in. Felt the weight of all the unspoken years press against my chest. Then let's start small, I said. Just coffee. Somewhere quiet. You and me. We met at a small cafe near Tower Grove Park. Emily wore no makeup. She looked human. She reached for the salt shaker 3 times during our conversation but never used it. We talked. About Dad. About the day I left for Beirut. About what it felt like to lose the version of family I thought I'd always have. She listened. For once, really listened. And when I showed her a photo of Amina, the little girl with the burns who now wrote me letters in pencil, her eyes filled with tears. She looks so strong, she said. She is, I replied. She reminds me of someone. That night I lit a candle on my windowsill. Not for anyone else. Just for myself. To mark the end of waiting. And the beginning of choosing. Because from now on I would decide who got access, who got explanations, who got me. Thanksgiving came with clouds. Heavy Missouri gray clouds that seemed to settle low on the rooftops, dragging everything with them. I almost canceled. But I didn't. I packed a pineapple homemade and drove to Emily's house in silence. No music. Just the rhythmic turn of tires over wet pavement and my own breathing steady now, not tight like it used to be. I wasn't going for them, not for apology, not for validation. I went for my name. For my seat. Emily opened the door before I knocked. She looked nervous. You came, she said. I nodded, stepping inside. The house smelled like sage butter and cinnamon. The kind of smell that used to mean home. My mother was in the kitchen stirring gravy. She turned. Oh, she said, you're early. I'm on time, I replied. She blinked. Ben appeared from the hallway. He walked up and hugged me tight, not performative. You look tired, he said. I look like someone who's lived a life, I answered. He smiled. Yeah, that tracks. Dinner was set on a long oak table. China I remembered from my childhood. Glassware that hadn't seen a dishwasher in decades. Lucy walked in last. She froze when she saw me. Then said, Hi, Mom. My breath caught. I nodded. Hi, sweetheart. She took the seat beside me. Chose it herself. We ate in near silence at first. Passing dishes. Chewing. Sips of wine. Then Ben broke it. Did you all know what Mom got in DC? My mother shifted. Emily stiffened. Lucy looked up. Ben continued, eyes locked on them. She got a medal. For valor. From the president. For saving lives under fire. He wasn't bragging. He was naming truth. Emily cleared her throat. Yes, we heard. Ben turned to me. You want to tell them what you actually did? I wiped my mouth gently, then laid down my fork. No, I said. I don't need to anymore. But Lucy looked at me, really looked. So I did. I was stationed with a medical NGO in northern Sudan. We were ambushed. 2 vehicles destroyed, 14 wounded. I kept 7 of them alive long enough to evacuate. 1 died in my arms. I paused. My name was on the casualty list. But someone crossed it off. Silence. My mother looked at her plate. Emily bit her lip. Then Lucy asked quietly, why didn't we know? I turned to her. Because I stopped trying to make you ask. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the family archive Emily had published. Same brown leather cover. Same embossed crest. But mine had edits. Margins full of truth. Photos they never printed. Letters I'd written and never sent. I slid it across the table. Here's the version where I exist. Emily didn't touch it, but she didn't look away either. My mother reached for it with trembling hands. She opened to a page titled Legacy, the Women of Our Family. And read Karen Whitmore, Field Medic. Humanitarian, honoree. Mother. Survivor. She closed the book softly. Her voice was small. I didn't know how to be proud of something I didn't understand. I took a deep breath. I never asked you to understand. I asked you to care. She nodded. Then whispered, I see it now. The room stayed still. But something shifted. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just real. Ben leaned back in his chair. Lucy reached for my hand. I let her. Later, after the pie and the dishes, I stood in the entryway putting on my coat. My mother came up behind me. She held out a small box. Inside, my grandfather's original medic badge, worn, tarnished, beautiful. He carried this through Normandy, she said. I know. He wanted it buried with him. I kept it. She looked at me. Now I think he'd want you to have it. I held it in my palm, heavy, warm. I'll take good care of it. Emily walked me to the door. She didn't apologize. And I didn't need her to. But she did say this. If I write another version, will you help me tell it right? I paused. Then said, only if we call it what it is. Not redemption, but recognition. She nodded. That's fair. Driving home, I played music. First time in weeks. James Taylor. Fire and Rain. I sang along softly, fingers tapping the steering wheel. The clouds had cleared. The air was sharp with night. I rolled the window down and let the cold sting my cheeks. It felt honest. It felt earned. That night, I put the medal and the badge side by side, 2 weights of history, 2 lives that bled into each other. I didn't feel like a hero, I felt whole. 6 months later, I moved. Not far, just out of the cramped apartment above the hardware store, into a small brick house in the south end of the city. 2 bedrooms. A porch swing. Sunlight that hit the kitchen table around 7:20 every morning. I didn't tell many people, not because I was hiding. But because this home didn't need to prove anything. It was mine. And for the first time in years, I wasn't living between missions or in borrowed spaces. I planted tomatoes. Badly. They leaned sideways, stubborn and uneven. But they grew. God, they grew. Ben helped me move a bookshelf one weekend. Lucy brought over an old drawing she'd done at age 7, a picture of us holding hands under a big purple sun. I framed it, hung it in the hallway beside my medal, and a photo of Amina, now 12, smiling gap-toothed from a refugee classroom. History and future side by side. At work, I took a new position. Training coordinator for medical deployments. Less field, more mentorship. I taught 22-year-olds how to stop a bleed with one hand, how to calm a screaming mother, how to read a room where everyone speaks panic. Sometimes they called me ma'am. Sometimes sergeant. Mostly they just watched my hands. They asked about the medal. I always said the same thing: it's not the medal that matters. It's the lives you bring home. I started writing again. Not reports. Stories. Little fragments I'd tucked away for years. Letters never sent. The way the light hit Daniel's cast when he finally stood. The smell of iodine and earth in Mosul. The sound of my own name said without shame. I submitted one piece to a small online journal. They published it with the title "I Wasn't Missing, I Was Working." It went quietly viral. I read the comments slowly, carefully. One woman wrote, "I thought I was invisible too." This made me remember I'm not. That one I printed. Taped it to my fridge. My mother calls every Sunday now. Sometimes we talk for 10 minutes, sometimes 2. She tells me about her church friends. I tell her about soil composition and compost. We don't revisit the past. But there's something soft in her voice now. Less resistance. More listening. She sent me a birthday card last month. Inside, a photo of her holding my grandfather's medic badge. She wrote, "I wish I'd seen you sooner. But I'm glad I get to see you now." I kept it. Not because I needed it, but because it was real. Emily and I aren't best friends. But we're honest now. She invited me to speak at her university's symposium on global women in leadership. I laughed when I saw the flyer. Featuring Karen Whitmore, decorated humanitarian. Not bad, I texted her. She replied with one word: "Finally." Lucy came to visit last weekend. We sat on the porch swing, drinking mint tea and eating dry cookies I overbaked. She told me about a friend who wanted to join the Peace Corps, asked if I'd talk to her. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "I used to think you left us. Now I understand you were building something bigger, something I get to stand on." I didn't speak, didn't trust my voice. But I squeezed her hand. That was enough. At night I light one small candle. Not for grief. Not for memory. Just for quiet. A ritual to remind myself. This is not a life I escaped into. It's one I built choice by quiet choice. I don't need them to tell my story right anymore. Because I've already written it. In scars. In lives saved. In children who still call my name when no one else could hear it. This is what legacy really means. Not statues. Not applause. But knowing that something stands where you once bled, and that others will climb from it stronger. I don't attend every family gathering. I go when I want to. Leave when I need to. Speak when I have something true to say. I've stopped hoping for closeness that feels forced, but I've started creating something better. Clarity. Boundaries. Peace. The world doesn't always reward quiet strength, but it remembers it. In the places you show up without fanfare, in the lives you mend with no cameras watching, in the small, fierce decision to be yourself even when no one claps. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for their version of me. Not for the seat they never saved. Because I built my own table. And the view from here, it's wide, it's steady, and it's mine. Tell me, have you ever stopped chasing their recognition only to find your real voice waiting? Share your story below. You never know who needs to hear it. You are not alone. Every ending can be a new beginning. Subscribe to Ian Reddit's Story for more real stories of closure and empowerment.